everyone, Pam Gregory, astrologer. I'm going to be speaking to you today about the second half of December and the full moon that we have coming up in Cancer on the 22nd. Now, we have continuing in the second half the square between Uranus and the nodal axis. Uranus has retrograded into the last couple of degrees of Aries, 28, 29 of Aries, and it is also now conjunct Eris, and both Uranus and Eris have sudden, eruptive, disruptive qualities. So we can see this in the incidence of very big earthquakes, which we've had in Alaska and also in the Pacific recently in the last couple of days. Very big earthquakes, 7 magnitude plus. It has an eruptive effect in society as well. So we've seen major protests in France, we've seen big protests in the UK around good old Brexit, and we've seen climate protests in many countries, very much involving young people. Remember, Uranus is the planet associated with youth. So these eruptive qualities are going to continue through this month and possibly even get a little stronger as we move into January. I'll talk about that in a moment. But they also have this wonderful quality of breaking down to break through, to a higher level of being, because the impetus of Uranus and Eris is always to shift you to a higher level of being. So it's very common at these times that sensitive people can get downloads of information. They're much more connected to their superconscious. That's very much Uranus. So it can allow us to take quantum leaps and shifts in our consciousness. Another aspect that we may be seeing more of in the next few months is Jupiter is in Sagittarius for the next year, and Uranus, as I say, has just retrograded recently in November back to Aries. Now, Aries is about new discoveries. It's about being pioneering, and Uranus is the planet also most associated with aviation. Jupiter is big horizons. In Sagittarius particularly, it's about going beyond. So the combination of these can suggest that we may start to find even more evidence of life beyond our Earth at this time as well. Certainly getting some rumblings in that direction, a lot more being seen. And again, that is connected to our shift in consciousness, because it's only when we shift our frequency to a higher level that we are possibly able to perceive other forms of life in a way that we may not have been able to before. Mars is also conjunct to Neptune. This is ongoing from the first part of the month. Now, very literally, this can mean attack Mars at sea. Neptune, as it was earlier in December. However, it can also manifest in some really lovely ways, because it's about putting energy into the spiritual, into spiritual practice. That's Neptune. So it can be that you become more dedicated in your spiritual practice, whether that's meditation or whether it's more physical, yoga, tai chi, qigong, great time to do that. But at another level, again, Neptune is also about compassion. It's about devotion. It's about caring for others who are less privileged than we are. That's very much Neptune. So particularly if you're celebrating Christmas at this time, it's a very good time to think about how can you help others less well off than yourself. Can you go on a soup run? Can you visit a care home? What can you do to very positively use that wonderful Mars conjunct Neptune energy at this time? We then have the Capricorn solstice. This is happening on the 21st of December, and it's happening at 5:22 p.m. Eastern. That's if you run the chart for Washington. And what we see then is that the Mars-Neptune conjunction is straddling the midheaven for that chart set in Washington for the Capricorn solstice. Now, it's just really remarkable how many, over the last 2 years, how many solstices and equinoxes, if we set the chart for Washington at those times, do we get Neptune on an angle, particularly the midheaven, but also the ascendant. Here, it's on the midheaven again. So this is I mean, Neptune can either be expressing compassion and spirituality, think of the administration at the moment, or it can express in a different way around scandals, leaks, secrets, deceit, but secrets also starting to come out into the open under the light of this full moon, which I'm going to be talking about in a moment. And that's particularly because transiting Neptune is square to the ascendant-descendant axis of the US chart. That's 10 past 5, 4th of July, 1776, Philadelphia. So that's a suggestion that second half of this month, secrets could be coming out, secrets could be coming to the fore in a bigger way. We also have at this time Mercury conjunct Jupiter. This is happening at 9 degrees of Sagittarius, and this is also conjunct the fixed star Antares. This is a magical fixed star. So this is very, very positive for big thinking, big philosophical thinking, bigger horizons, bigger possibilities, and there's a sense of inspiration with it. This is very similar to the new moon in Sagittarius sort of energy that we had in the first half of the month. Transiting Neptune is also square to Mercury, and that increases the kind of high level of the mind, the imagination and inspiration of the mind at this time. This is particularly around the full moon that this is happening. So on the 22nd of the month, this is happening at 0 degrees 48 minutes of Cancer. It's happening at 9:48 a.m. Pacific and 5:48 p.m. UK time. Now, because this is our second lunation at 0 degrees. We have 5 lunations at 0 degrees of their signs, and then in April we have a full moon at 29 degrees of its sign. And as I've mentioned earlier, 0 degrees, 29 degrees of signs are critical degrees or power degrees. They tend to throw things onto the public stage in a bigger way, and that is certainly more true of this one, this full moon in Cancer, because 0 of the cardinals is the world axis. So 0 of Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn represents the world axis, and 2 degrees to either side of that. So 2 degrees of the mutables to 28 degrees of the mutables to 2 degrees of the cardinals. That band, if you like, represents the world axis. So this full moon at 0:48 of Cancer is conjunct the world axis, and that will throw events onto the public stage in a bigger way. Events might have global implications more fully than they would do normally. So, and a full moon will always bring feelings to a head, particularly when it's a water full moon, which this is. Cancer's a water sign, particularly when it's Cancer, because the moon rules Cancer. So at a full moon, the moon is at the peak of its cycle and it's in its own sign. So we may have very sensitive, strong emotions happening at this time, a lot of sentimentality. We may very much want to hunker down with our family and loved ones. Cancer represents the family and the home, and a feeling of safety and security, very much with this Cancer archetype. But it's also very much about nurturing others and knowing what others need, instinctively knowing what others need to feel nurtured. And this is like the continuing theme from the Mars-Neptune conjunction of caring for others, being philanthropic. Because remember that the nodal axis has shifted into Cancer-Capricorn. It'll be in those signs for the next 17 months with the North Node in Cancer. We are being encouraged to get in touch with our feelings, our compassion, our nurturing and caring for others. That is part of the purpose of the North Node being in Cancer. Really, really lovely. So very much this feeling of caring for others. We also have at this full moon, Mars has now moved on away from Neptune to conjunct Chiron. And that is about putting energy into healing others. Mars energy, Chiron, healing others who are suffering. Now they may be suffering either from fire, Mars, and the results of that, or the fact they're both in Pisces, it can be some kind of flooding. But whatever the situation, there is this instinct, this full moon is bringing up to care for others. Now, this is a very, as I say, emotional, watery full moon. Not only is the moon in its own sign of Cancer, we have Venus in Scorpio, which is very intense emotional energy, and we have Mars, Neptune and Chiron in Pisces. So a lot of water, a lot of feeling energy. But equally, we have a lot of cardinal energy. The cardinal signs are Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn. So if we include Eris in this, we have 6 planets in cardinal signs. We have the moon in Cancer, we have the Sun, Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn, and we have Uranus and Eris in Aries. So there's a desire to take action. This is about leadership and initiating things. So it's a very good time to begin things, initiate things, and to start to think about what you'd like to initiate in 2019 and indeed complete in 2019. And when you do that, I'd very much suggest that it isn't just your regular kind of goal setting of, jobs or status or whatever. Who do you want to be? Who do you want to be in terms of a spiritual, caring, loving being? How are you going to achieve that? That may be much more subtle, but actually way more important, because as we move into 2019, increasingly we're going to have some very heavy Capricorn energy, a lot of planets moving into Capricorn. And Capricorn is one of the least emotional signs. It's about rules, regulations. That's what the law says it is. We have to obey the rules. It's very kind of austere in a way. And so getting into our hearts, getting into our caring for others is a very big part of this whole picture in the second half of December. Remember also, I've mentioned this before, but Pluto is starting to move to a conjunction with the South Node in Capricorn. It's about 6 degrees away in the second half of December. It's going to become conjunct in the spring of 2019. And as I've mentioned, the South Node in Capricorn historically is about certain institutions or organisations or governments having too much power, being seen as an excess of power, or being corrupt with their power, an abuse of power, that sort of thing, because the heavyweight emphasis in Capricorn is very much about top-down power. So we have an interesting sort of paradox happening at this full moon, where there is a lot of emotion happening, a lot of sensitivity to suffering happening. Potentially there could be a lot of social unrest as well, as I mentioned at the beginning, but in some way there's a feeling of suppression by this strong law and order top-down Capricorn energy. So just observe in the world. I love to use astrology to sit back and be the witness, to sit back and observe how these threads are playing out, but stay objective, stay in your heart center when you do that. Try not to get too caught up in the negativity of it. Just feel what you can contribute as a loving human being to help the situation. At this full moon, particularly as we move to the end of the year, we have Mars on the 31st of December moving into its own sign of Aries. So it's going to be moving into 0 of Aries. It will stay on that world axis, 0 of Aries, from the 31st of December to the 3rd of January. So that adds a lot of assertiveness and increased dynamism into this mix of social unrest. So it becomes even more lively potentially over the new year. So be very aware of that. Also, we have Venus conjunct Ceres, the goddess of Mother Earth, Ceres, and in Scorpio at this full moon. So this is literally love of the earth. And Neptune is also trining the moon, and this can, trining Venus. This can sensitize us to beauty and colour, but it also brings in not just a practical what can we do, each one of us, to love our earth better? How can we change our daily habits to love our earth better? But this is almost an existential, spiritual connection with the earth, knowing that we are deeply, not just that we live on it, but deeply, deeply we are connected to the earth. There's a whole feedback system in terms of our breath going out, being taken in by plants and trees, and equally that whole interchange, and our DNA actually being interchanged with living beings around the earth. And that's not woo-woo, that's science in terms of this profound sense of interchange with our earth. Loving our earth is the big picture for many years to come, until we can stabilise some of these extreme earth events. So a lot going on at this time. I do feel it's very much a sense, as we move out of 2018 and into 2019, a sense of endings and beginnings. A whole series of 6 lunations at 0 of their signs and 29 degrees of its sign in April. Uranus and Eris squaring the nodal axis. We have Mars conjunct Chiron, a sensitivity to suffering on the world axis too, and a great sense of energy shifting as we go into 2019 with increasing Capricorn energy. And I have a sense also that the power nature of certain organisations may increase a little until it becomes more challenged potentially by the power of the people, the will of the people. Because again, at this full moon, not only do we have Uranus and Eris square the nodal axis, but we also have Uranus trine to the sun and sextile the moon. And so there's always this sense of protest, to demand more freedom, to demand greater egalitarianism, to demand that your voice is heard, and a sense of the power of the people, humble, ordinary people on the street, challenging any power which has become, in society's eyes, a little too much for the balance of society, and for a sense of equality within society. Maybe living in a world where things are becoming more unequal, but as we move out of the end of 2020 into 2021 and onwards, we're going to change that balance really quite significantly, I believe. So a lot there. If you haven't, if you don't know where this full moon at 0 of Cancer falls in your chart, because you'll understand so much more of what I've been saying here if you know where it falls, check out the link above. That will take you to my store. You can buy a 2-part video series, which people are just getting so much out of in understanding what this means for you. So if you have a "what does this mean for me" question, the videos will answer it for you, not only for this update, but for any update I ever do. If you'd like to check out my website, books, which are lovely for the festive period if you're buying presents, that's a kind of no-brainer for somebody who's interested in astrology, my tutorial videos, my ever so long monthly newsletter where I can go into much more detail, it's all there on the website pamgregory.com. And may I thank you at the end of 2019 for your amazing, amazing, faithful and loving support of my work. I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for you. And if you are celebrating festivities at this time, have a beautiful, peaceful, loving Christmas period. And we're starting to move into the eclipse period in January, and the next video will be starting to look at those. Take care. Bye for now.